Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to play a little bit of a game with you, and that game is 50 Shades of Grey versus Twilight. So I read 50 Shades of Grey and finished it the other day, and every time that I saw something that Twilight has exactly the same of, I wrote it down, and we're going to see which book does it better in terms of does it make more sense in this book, or is it just better done in this book? And I'm going to try and be as objective as possible, so this is not going to be my subjective opinion on what I thought of 50 Shades of Grey or on Twilight. If you want to hear my thoughts on Twilight, I've got a Twilight Read It Backwards video, and if you want to hear my thoughts on 50 Shades of Grey, you should wait for my wrap-up video, which is going to probably be my next video. But nonetheless, let's give each book points depending on which one does it better and see which book wins. Before we get started, just so you know, this video contains
spoilers.
So first of all, Anna and Bella both meet their love interest by doing something that they don't want to do, but they're doing for someone that they love. For example, Bella meets Edward by moving to Forks for her mum, and Anna meets Christian Grey by doing an interview for Kate because she's ill. And I have to say that 50 Shades of Grey is going to get this point because I feel like Anna's reasons for doing the interview are far more justified than Bella moving all the way to Forks. I feel like Bella could have made it work with her mum, and therefore the 50 Shades of Grey reason just makes a bit more sense to me. Then we've got both of them going to a place where they feel like they don't fit in. Bella says that she doesn't fit in small schools, so she feels like she doesn't relate to people her age and therefore doesn't fit in. And in 50 Shades of Grey, Anna thinks that she doesn't fit in with doing an interview in this business because of the fact that she's more interested in publishing and it's not really her forte. Again, 50 Shades of Grey is going to get the point here because I feel like it makes more sense for Bella to fit in a school of teenagers than it is for Anna to fit into an industry that she's not got anything to do with. Both of these main characters, Anna and Bella, prefer the company of a British novel. Don't think there's a book that does this better. I just leave this one fairly equal. Apparently both characters are clumsy. Bella is always clumsy and Anna trips her way into Grey's office and she says that she's clumsy, but for this one the point goes to Twilight because in Twilight they refer to Bella's clumsiness continuously and it's a part of her and a trait, whereas with Anna I feel like it was just at the beginning that she mentions being clumsy and then she's like, oh, I'm clumsy, but she never does anything like tripping over or anything that shows that she's unbalanced and clumsy. So then we've got Grey and Edward. Grey and Edward both sound very condescending when talking to Anna and Bella, and they both have a way of talking as if they've got their own inside private joke that the other person is not on the in of. So they talk like they're talking to children when they're talking to their love interest. I feel like the point's going to go to Twilight because in Edward's perspective he's been alive for 100 years, so I guess humans who've only been alive for 18 years, they're more like children to him, so it makes more sense for him to talk to them like they're children. Whereas Grey, he's intimidating because he's got a lot of money, but he can still talk to people as if they're on an equal level. I mean, Edward can do it too, but I feel like Edward's reasons are a bit more justified. Then we've got Edward and Grey both being overly possessive. We've got Christian even calling Anna mine more often, and that's supposed to be like a dom thing. And then we've got Edward who just has a very controlling obsession with Bella. I'm gonna give the point to Twilight just because for Edward it's supposed to be that Bella is his like mate, and you know, vampires supposedly when they get in their romantic relationship they're very steady and in it for life, and he's got that primal nature of a vampire which is making him more protective. And if we're just going to fall on the supernatural reasons, Twilight's going to win just because Christian keeps calling Anna mine before they've even accepted a deal or decided that they're going to be together, and Twilight just wins. So then we've got Bella and Anna both being immediately fascinated once they meet their love interest. Anna is immediately fascinated by Grey. She thinks he's enamoring, his eyes, his intensity, the fact that he has so much money but he's such a mystery. And then we have Edward being interesting to Bella just because they're all adopted, he looks very different. But I am going to give this point to 50 Shades of Grey just because personally I feel like meeting a billionaire who no one seems to know that much about, even though he's a celebrity, is in some way and form fascinating, especially when you are interviewing them and you get to ask all the questions rather than talking to Jessica in a cafeteria. We have to talk about the stalking and the essentially the stalking. Both of them follow their love interests, and to a degree that's just over the top. Edward follows Bella into another city. Christian seems to know everything about where Anna lives, to where Anna is going. I am going to give Twilight the point. I kind of feel like nobody deserves the point, but at least in Twilight, Edward's using people's minds to track Bella, and I guess that's legal. He's using supernatural powers, but it's legal and he can track her scent, herself and stuff. But Christian, I mean, I guess the information is probably out there somewhere online, but it just feels especially unnerving that Christian is stalking Anna to that degree just because he's not supposed to be able to. It's a bit unnerving, and I much prefer Edward stalking to Grey stalking, but overall I prefer no stalking whatsoever. In both of these books they mention that they need their heart rate to return to a normal place after they've spent some time with their male love interest. So Anna's heartbeat is doing crazy things and Bella's heartbeat is doing crazy things, but the point goes to 50 Shades of Grey because in no way, no point of time in 50 Shades of Grey does it say that her heart stopped completely because of something that the male interest did, because in Twilight there's a moment where Bella's heart completely stops on the monitor and it's a bit ridiculous. So once they meet their love interest, they both each have one encounter that doesn't go so well, and then they decide to forget all about it and just try to live life as normal, but of course it's not going to happen. So for Bella, Edward reacts to her in the chemistry lab and he seems like he hates her, and she's just like, okay, I'm going to try and put him out of mind and get back to living life as normal. And for Anna, she has her interview and then she asks Christian if he's gay, and then she feels horrified and she decides that she's going to forget all about the interview and continue life as normal. I'm going to go with Twilight just because I feel like Bella's reasons for being horrified are a lot more believable. If someone acts like that towards you in class and then turns out to disappear, then you're trying to forget about that. So then we have to talk about the reasons why they are intrigued by each other. So for Bella, she's intrigued with Edward because she thinks he might be otherworldly and she wants to know what this otherworldly thing could be. And then in 50 Shades of Grey, Anna says she's intrigued because she wants to know what makes someone so driven to succeed and success as Christian is. And the point's going to go to Twilight just because I feel like it's so hard to argue with this whole supernatural element. I'd be way more interested in a supernatural being than a billionaire and trying to figure out what he's like. And I also feel like for Christian Grey, she's like, I want to know why he's so driven to success, and then as soon as the romance starts, that's completely dropped and she doesn't seem that interested in that anymore. She's more interested in the romance side of things. In both cases, the male love interest talks in a way that they shouldn't necessarily talk. So for example, Edward uses phrases that 100-year-old people would say, which makes sense seeing as he's a 100-year-old vampire, and Grey apparently is always very polite and uses these fancy words from time to time, which puts him as on another level. And the point goes to Twilight. It makes more sense as to why Edward is using this old lingo rather than Grey just being formal all the time in every aspect of his life. Then we've got the two funny job situations. Bella works at a hiking shop even though she does not hike and she's not interested in that. We've got Anna working at a hardware store even though she doesn't do DIY. That's just a similarity. I don't think anybody wins or loses here. In fact, I'll let 50 Shades of Grey have the point because Christian Grey visits her in the hardware shop and then those hardware items are used later on, whereas Bella never seems to use anything from the hiking shops. So then we've got the dreams. Dreams feature a lot in these books. In the Dreams of Twilight, Bella refers to dreaming about Edward or his eyes or something, and that's it. We don't actually get to see the dreams except for the nightmare one where she figures out what he is. And then in 50 Shades of Grey, Anna is also dreaming of Grey and she's dreaming of some very heated times together. And I have to say that the point's going to go to Twilight just because I like the fact that we don't get to see every single dream. I feel like it'd be a bit slower if we saw every single dream that she dreamt about Edward and a bit over the top. And in 50 Shades of Grey, I did think the dreams were over the top and also we just didn't need them. We've got character similarities. We've got Jose in 50 Shades of Grey, who is essentially Jacob in the Twilight saga. Jose is Anna's best friend. He doesn't seem to understand boundaries. He's in love with Anna and he even sexually assaults her. And similarly, we've got Jacob, who is again a best friend who also essentially sexually assaults her, and doesn't seem to understand her boundaries. I'm going to say that 50 Shades of Grey, I don't know, it annoys me. That character annoys me in both of them because they do bad things, and then the female character forgives them, so I feel like they were equally annoying. In fact, the point goes to 50 Shades of Grey for making Jose more annoying and for making the sexual assault situation more explicit, so you can see just how wrong it is. But I do think 50 Shades of Grey showed it in a more problematic light, and therefore I guess it's better for that reason. Then we've got Paul and Mike. So Mike is from Twilight, and he is someone who's in Bella's class who keeps asking her out again and again and again, even though Bella has said no very clearly. And then in 50 Shades of Grey we've got Paul, who is the family friend for the people who own the hardware store, so that's kind of the connection to Mike, and he also continually asks Anna out again and again and again. And I think I'm going to give the point to 50 Shades of Grey for the opposite reason as the previous point, is that I liked Paul more. He was still very, very annoying, but once Bella said, oh, I'm dating Christian Grey, Paul just dropped completely out of the story. The author must have forgotten about him, but that's great. Whereas in Twilight, Mike just continues to crop back up and try in every single scenario he gets, and it annoys me to no end. Then we've got the implication that Grey and Edward are dangerous. Lots of characters reiterate that there's something dark about Grey, but Edward is also trying to reiterate that there's something dark about him. The point goes to Edward. The dark point is that he might eat her and kill her. I think that just beats BDSM. Hands down. Dying or BDSM? Dying. Scarier. In 50 Shades of Grey, Grey constantly refers to the fact that Anna is hard to read and he doesn't always know what she's thinking. And also in Twilight, Edward can't read Bella's mind when he can read everybody else's mind. So in that degree, Bella is hard to read for him. The point has to go to Twilight because it makes so much more sense why Bella is hard to read, just because he actually physically can't read her mind. We've got the almost crash. Anna almost crashes into a cyclist and Grey pulls her back. And then in Twilight, Bella almost gets smashed by a car and Edward saves her. Again, the point's going to go to Twilight just because a car crash is scarier than a cyclist crash, even though both of them are very, very dangerous. We've got the whole part where they're starting to discuss, but then they suddenly get a rejection. So Grey rejects Anna first of all because he thinks that he's not the right person for Anna, and Edward rejects Bella because he's a vampire and could potentially eat her. So the point's going to go to Twilight because the reasons for rejection make more sense in Edward's case. Both of these characters feel inferior in terms of looks. Anna thinks she's not beautiful and yet she's got loads of people asking her out all the time, and Bella thinks she's not particularly special, but all the time that she's discussing not being particularly special, she's often holding herself up into the Cullens light, and yet she gets a lot of male attention at school as well. I'm going to give this point to 50 Shades of Grey because in the beginning Anna mentions that she's not beautiful, but over the course of her relationship with Grey, she starts to feel more empowered, she starts to feel more gorgeous, and she stops moping about her looks so much and just feels beautiful. And it's I guess that's a nice thing to see happen. It's a shame that it needed a relationship, but the fact that she does make some progress on that degree gives the point to 50 Shades of Grey. So we've got the smiles. So in Twilight, the smile that is always referred to is the crooked smile that Edward gives, and in Grey, in 50 Shades of Grey, Grey has this I have a big secret that you don't know smile. I'm gonna give the point to I'm gonna give the point to 50 Shades of Grey just because as soon as she knows the secret, the smile turns into just I feel attracted to you right now and I want to tie you up kind of smile, so it transforms, whereas Edward's crooked smile just stays a crooked smile throughout the entire series. So in both books, the female love interest does not want the male love interest to buy them gifts. Anna doesn't want Grey buying her gifts and Bella doesn't want Edward buying her gifts, and Bella's reason is that it puts them at a larger imbalance because Edward's already so much hotter than her. Gifts just put it on the next tier. And then for 50 Shades of Grey, Anna doesn't want Grey to buy her gifts because he's a billionaire, and then it makes her feel a bit cheap, and because she's going to be signing a contract completely in his control, it definitely makes her feel iffy. And I feel like it makes a bit more sense in 50 Shades of Grey, and Anna's reasoning just makes more sense to me, and yeah, I would be able to relate to that more. In both of them, we have main characters who love classical music, and that's a connecting point for the two main characters, but I'm going to give this one to Twilight, just because that's the soul music that Edward seems to listen to, whereas for 50 Shades of Grey, Grey listens to a lot of music. Classic music just seems to be one of them. In both cases we have our male love interest needing to remind the other characters to breathe. Bella often just stops breathing and Anna also stops breathing, but I'm going to give this point to Twilight just because it's a funny moment where Bella forgets to breathe and actually faints because she forgets to breathe, and that's just entertaining to me, so it gets the point. Then we have the scene where Grey is playing the piano and Anna says there's nothing that Grey can't do, and there's essentially the same scene in Twilight where Edward is playing the piano and Bella thinks there's nothing that Edward can't do. But the point has to go to Twilight because in Twilight Bella has her own lullaby that Edward plays for her, which is quite romantic. We have to talk about the fact that there's a secret that the male love interests have to hide at all. Grey with his BDSM tendencies and Edward with being a vampire, and Supernatural is just going to win here again. I think keeping vampirism a secret is definitely a bigger secret that needs to be kept. Then we have the discovering of the secret and the knowledge that even though the secret involves wanting to hurt her, ex-person would never truly hurt them. So Anna says Grey wants to hurt her because of BDSM tendencies, but he would never truly want to really cause her physical pain to a drastic degree, to an injury degree. And then we have Edward wanting to eat Bella but defying himself so that he would never kill her and actually do so. I think I'm gonna give the point to Twilight because again it's fighting it's fighting wanting to eat her, which is a big thing to fight. We've got the fact that apparently Grey doesn't sleep with anyone in his bed, like he just doesn't like falling asleep with people. Then we've got the fact that Edward doesn't sleep at all, and again the point has to go to Twilight because not sleeping at all is a pretty big reason not to spend many nights with people. Then we've got inconsistency because Grey says, oh, I never sleep with people, and then he spends the whole book sleeping with Anna. And then we've got Edward saying like, I never do this, and then he does it with Bella. So both of them say like, I never do this, and then they proceed to do it all the time completely. But I'm going to give the point to 50 Shades of Grey because there's one thing that Grey really doesn't like, and that's being touched, and he's consistent with that throughout the book. And I'm struggling to think of what Edward is consistent with. But the whole idea that I'm not angry with you, I'm angry with myself. Both of them say that a lot, Edward and Grey, and I think I'm gonna give the point to Twilight just because there were some times when 50 Shades of Grey is angry at Anna, so I don't understand why he says that. We've got the parental figures, the mothers specifically, being very happy that their son has finally found someone, just because Grey hasn't really dated anyone in a very long time, and then we've got Edward who hasn't dated anyone in a long time as well. And the point's gonna go to Twilight just because Esme must have been more relieved because it's been 100 years, whereas for Grey it's been 20 something, however old he is, so you know. We've got the shady past scenario, we've got Edward who's gone off and killed a bunch of people because he didn't understand Carlisle and the vegetarian diet and was rebelling. And then we've got Grey, whose form of rebellion was his childhood trauma and what Miss Robinson did to him. I'm gonna give the point to 50 Shades of Grey just because the childhood trauma just sounds very disturbing, and just quite like, it's really brushed over, not as in it's brushed over, but it's very kept in the dark and very mysterious, and I feel like it's definitely impacted him along the way. Of course Edward's decision has impacted him along the way, but I feel like it's definitely impacted Grey a lot more. Both Anna and Bella mention not being able to keep up with their love interest mood swings, and while Edward does swing from mood to mood quite intensely, I think Grey swings from mood to mood even more, and therefore 50 Shades of Grey gets that point. So we've also got both girls mentioning that they dazzle the other person. Edward dazzles people, Grey dazzles people or intimidates people more likely. I'm gonna say Twilight gets the point just because it makes more sense for Edward to consistently dazzle people than Grey, who is supposed to be intimidating rather than dazzling. In both of these we see conversations about past potential loves for the male character, and in both cases they get jealous. Bella gets jealous of these people, the vampires in Denali? I don't know how you say that. And Anna gets jealous of the 15 that came before her. I think it makes more sense for Bella to be jealous just because in those cases they were looking for romantic relationships, and Grey has not been looking for a romantic relationship until he met Anna. We've got Ray versus Charlie, who are the dad figures in this book, and they're both described almost the same. They're quiet, reliable, people who love fishing and just get by on their own. I think I'm going to give the point to Twilight just because Charlie's more involved and he's a character we all really love. Charlie carries the Twilight saga, whereas, you know, Ray's just not that present. He's nice, but he's just not, like, he's not Charlie, essentially. And we've got the two mother characters. So in Bella's story, we've got Renee, and Renee is an oblivious mother who's recently in a new marriage to someone called Phil. And in this book, the mother is also in a new marriage, and I also think it's just someone called Phil. I could be wrong, I could not be remembering correct, but I think they're both newly married to people called Phil. And I'm going to give the point to Twilight for this one, just because although Renee is a bit like oblivious sometimes, she still really does care and love Bella, and you can see her asking Bella about her day and such, whereas in the beginning we don't get that from the mother in 50 Shades of Grey. We've got using affection as distraction. We have Edward often kissing Bella to try and tamper with her memory a little bit, and then we've got in 50 Shades of Grey him using sex to erase some of the time that they could spend talking and distract Anna. I think I'm going to give the point to Twilight just because in Twilight this happens less and it's not a healthy thing to do. Then we've got our dramatic goodbye kisses. So at one point Anna is not sure that Christian Grey is the one for her, so she decides to give him her dramatic goodbye kiss before they part in case they don't get to talk again. And in Twilight, when a hunter is hunting down Bella to eat her, Edward gives her a dramatic goodbye kiss because it might be the last kiss they ever get. The point obviously is going to go to Twilight because this is like a life or death situation, whereas for Christian and Anna it was just we need to make some choices. Anna drives an old car she loves a lot and Grey questions the safety of it, whereas Bella has her truck and Edward thinks it's a piece of junk and ridiculous. But the point has to go to Twilight because Bella loves her truck and thoroughly defends her truck, and she also gets to keep her truck for 3 whole books. That's how much she loves it, whereas in the first book already Anna's old car gets replaced, and the affection is there but not as strong as it is with Bella and her truck. Then we've got negotiations. So Anna and Christian negotiate this contract that they've set up for their scene playroom situation, and Edward and Bella are always negotiating different things, like trying to negotiate when she should become a vampire, what is she allowed to know and stuff, and negotiations play a big part in both books. I'm kind of stretching the whole Twilight series here because 50 Shades of Grey is just based off the Twilight saga, so it's got elements from all of them. And I think the negotiations are just done a bit better in Twilight because they reach conclusions, then they negotiate something else, and Bella has a very good, she's very clever with her negotiating, whereas with 50 Shades of Grey I feel like they negotiate and then they never reach a conclusion. In fact, Anna never actually signs that contract, so I feel like they negotiate, but like I feel like Twilight, the negotiations are more conclusive. Both of these books have one classic that they follow down a line and they just keep mentioning, and I know it's supposed to parallel what's happening in the story, but they just do it so much. So with Twilight that's Wuthering Heights, and then with 50 Shades of Grey that's Tess of the Urbervilles. And the point's gonna go to 50 Shades of Grey just because I read Wuthering Heights because of Twilight and I absolutely hated that book. So I know this is some bias coming in here, but I haven't read Tess of the Urbervilles, so I can't say I hated the book. Christian mentions that it takes all of his self-control to not always jump Anna's bones, whereas Edward's always mentioning how it takes all of his self-control not to eat Bella. So the point goes to Twilight because I feel like men can restrain themselves from jumping on girls much easier than Edward can restrain himself from eating a delicious human being. Then we have to compare the ridiculous title reasons. So 50 Shades of Grey is called 15 Shades of Grey because Christian is 50 shades of messed up. I'm not kidding you. And for Twilight, it's called Twilight because of Twilight is the safest time of day for them. And at one point, Bella and Edward are at prom and it's Twilight time. So I think 50 Shades of Grey gets the point for the ridiculous title has a ridiculous title reason, just because their reason is a lot more justified. We've got some pivotal moments that are happening in both of the love relationships. So for 50 Shades of Grey, that pivotal moment has to do with spanking, and in Twilight that pivotal moment has to do with a certain date to a meadow. I think I'm gonna have to give the point to 50 Shades of Grey just because it feels more of an icebreaker, it feels more of a pivotal moment than the Twilight meadow scene does. The meadow scene just seems like more of moments that they've already had before, whereas in 50 Shades of Grey that moment is definitely something different, uncharted territory that really needs, you know, thinking through. Then we've got the love interest's dad to compare, and I'm just going by name here because the character doesn't really have much to do in 50 Shades of Grey, so we can't compare Carlisle's character to the dad's character. But in 50 Shades of Grey, the name of Grey's father is Carrick. Sorry, it's Carrick. And in Twilight, the name is Carlisle. They're both names I don't hear very often, and I'm just gonna give the point to Carlisle because Carlisle beats Carrick in my opinion. This is subjective again, but that's what we have to deal with. The running and the screaming, and both of these books literally use the term running and screaming. We've got Anna in 50 Shades of Grey, and Grey is worried that if he shows her too much of the intense side of BDSM, Anna's gonna run and scream for the hills. And then we've got Edward, afraid that if he shows Bella something too vampiric, he's gonna run and scream for the hills. I think Edward's reason is a bit more justified. However, I do want to say that all of the vampire things that he shows Bella in the first book are fairly tame. Then we've got both Anna and Bella going to visit the mum and having a conversation with the mum about their romantic partner. I think this happens in New Moon for the Twilight Saga, but Bella goes to see Renee, and Renee says these things that are very on point about her and Edward's relationship, and Bella gaslights her in return. Whereas in 50 Shades of Grey, while Anna can't tell her mum everything, she's still fairly honest. So the point's going to go to 50 Shades of Grey because of the fact that she doesn't gaslight her mother and she tries to be as honest as she possibly can. I have to make the Mia-Alice comparison. Mia is Grey's sister in 50 Shades of Grey, and then Alice is Edward's sister, technically, sort of, in Twilight. And both of them are just over-enthusiastic, right off the bat friends with love interest, Bella or Anna, and I think that Alice is going to win the point just because I am biased towards loving Alice more, and it makes more sense why Alice is all in with the friendship because she has the power to see the future, so she already knows that her and Bella are going to be very, very good friends. We've also got the letters versus emails scenario. Sometimes Bella and Edward exchange notes in class when they write letters to each other, and in 50 Shades of Grey, Anna and Grey tend to exchange emails, and I'm going to give the point to 50 Shades of Grey just because they use them more, they use emails more for communication, and they use them more because it's how Anna most feels comfortable communicating. But I also really like the emails because they took up a lot of the page, which meant the book went faster. Grey turned towards BDSM because he didn't feel like he fit into this perfect family he was adopted into. And then we've got Edward, who turned away from vegetarian vampirism because he felt like he couldn't fit into Carlisle's perfect viewpoint, and then he turned back because he realized that he could. I'm gonna give the point to Twilight just because Edward works through that concept and he progresses past it, whereas Christian still feels like what happened to his childhood was justified and good, and he doesn't realize that he was abused. Then there is literally a scene in a restaurant in 50 Shades of Grey where they're in a restaurant, the waitress is attracted to Grey, and they're talking about resetting boundaries and why Grey's decided to ignore the boundaries and kind of go in a different way. And in Twilight, earlier on in the book in Twilight, you also have a scene where a waitress is attracted to Edward and Bella's wondering why Edward has decided to break all the rules for her. I'm gonna go with Twilight for this one. Again, it's just personal preference for this. I do love that scene in Twilight so much, and I think it does it so very well, so it just had to win. We've got both characters talking in their sleep, and I'm gonna say that Twilight does it better because Edward can stay up all night, so we can definitely hear everything that she says, and also I feel like Bella just says more interesting things in her sleep. In both of these stories, the male love interest acts horrified when the female character falls in love with them. Bella doesn't straightforwardly say that she's in love with Edward, but she keeps referring to how it's too late for her to change her emotions, and Edward is not happy about that, but he never outwardly directly rejects her. And Grey is very horrified when he hears that Anna loves him, and I can't remember if he rejects her straight off the bat, but he seems flabbergasted by this discovery. I think I'm gonna give it to Twilight just because I feel like Edward was a bit gracious. Oh no, he was quite mean. Okay, let's say nobody gets the point here. And then we come to the end, and I'm gonna slip into New Moon a bit here, which is to do with the separation. So in Twilight, Edward leaves Bella because he thinks it's best for her safety, and Bella has no say in the matter. Whereas in 50 Shades of Grey, Anna is the one who is leaving Grey because she thinks she can't fix him and give him what he needs, and she needs out even though it hurts both of them. And it's kind of also a mutual agreement in some way because Grey does agree that he can't give Anna also what what she wants. The point is definitely going to go to 50 Shades of Grey here. My favourite thing about this book was that moment. I think it was the best decision for both of them. That decision is not going to last because I know there are more books in the series, but I do think it was the best decision to make in that moment, and their reasons for doing so were great, and also it was a bit mutual. Like, Bella had no say in Twilight, and I guess in a breakup one party doesn't have any say, but I do think Edward's reasons for breaking up with Bella, like, even he didn't want it. I don't know. I feel like the reasons in 50 Shades of Grey were better. So I made a huge mistake in this video, and I didn't actually, like, I was like, in editing I can, you know, tally up the points and then see which one wins, but it means now at the end of the video I can't tell you which one won. But either which way, here are the end scores up on the screen right now, and which one was technically the best. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope you enjoyed this video because I had to read 50 Shades of Grey to make this video, okay? So comment down below saying which one you think should have won, or if I said anything you disagree with or agree with, let me know your opinions down below. And I hope you subscribe after this because this took some brain power to get through that book. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. You know what they say, after reading books like 50 Shades of Grey, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!